Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever applies to you. I hope you're well, and welcome back to Big Friendly. It's not Big Friendly Grub anymore, is it? It's Big Foodie Geek. Yep, I thought I'd relaunch the channel, come back with a new look, a new name, and I think this just fits me much better, and also it just doesn't conjure up imagery of eating insects, which has happened on the channel before.
Not the world's biggest spider fan.
It's not as big as I thought it would be, to be honest, but
Thank goodness!
3, 2, 1. It's been a while, hasn't it? 11 months, in fact, nearly a whole year. I took some time out for my mental health, for my physical health, and it turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it would be. And for the most part, it helped. Am I exactly where I want to be? No, not by any stretch of the imagination, no. But honestly, I thought I would end up postponing this video due to life. Once again, things have come up, things aren't great, but I knew I missed doing this. So, I thought I'd come back and I'd power through and just try and do something, for me that I enjoyed, and hopefully you enjoyed as well. And astonishingly, the channel has grown since I've been away by like 500 subscribers, so thank you for that. I just hope now that I'm back, I don't give you any reason to unsubscribe. Look, I've even put a shirt on for this auspicious occasion, so come on, give me a break. Anyway, I'm back, and I didn't want to just make my first video to be a bog standard recipe video, as much as that would be the easiest thing to do. And if I've managed to stick to my schedule, who knows, this video should be going out on World Bee Day. That's World Bee Day, not World Bidet, which is something else entirely.
I have one of those French things that shoots water up your butt.
Bidet.
Bidet to you, sir.
Nope, it's World Bee Day, and I wanted to do something special all about bees, why they're awesome and essential for this planet of ours, and focus on what bees give us, and yes, make some recipes with their stuff as well. But before we do that, buckle in, because I'm going to educate you and tell you why bees are like, well, the bee's knees. It's education time. Bees, scientifically known as Anthophila, are winged insects known for their role in pollination and producing honey. Though not all bees produce honey, only one type of bee does that, which we'll get onto later. Bees are found on every continent on the planet that contains insect-pollinated flowering plants, except for Antarctica, where there are only 2 species of flowering plants, and it's just too darn cold for poor bees to survive. In fact, there are no insects at all, unless you count parasites that live in the fur of sea animals and birds. There are over 4,000 types of bees and around 25,000 individual species, but there are probably even more species to be discovered. To name but a few types of bees, there are leafcutter bees, mason bees, mining bees, carpenter bees, plasterer bees, carder bees, flower bees, stingless bees, sweat bees, morning bees, scissor bees, nomad bees, longhorn bees, furrow bees, the super adorable bumblebees, and of course, honey bees, which are ruled over by the queen bee. Wait, not that queen bee. That queen bee. Bees feed on nectar and pollen, the former primarily as an energy source and the latter primarily for protein and other nutrients. But it's just the revered honeybee that uses the nectar to create honey. Honeybees work together as a team to decide where the best flowers are. They communicate with each other using bumps, noises, and even dance moves known as the waggle dance. I wonder if their favourite group is the Bee Gees. Nectar is the main ingredient for honey and also the main source of energy for bees. Using a long straw-like tongue called the proboscis, honeybees suck up nectar droplets from the flower's special nectar-making organ called the nectary. Honeybees have a stomach called the honey stomach, much like I have a stomach called Matt's dessert stomach. This stomach begins to break down the complex sugars of nectar into more simple sugars that are less prone to crystallization or becoming solid. This process is called inversion. The bees then take the nectar inside the colony and pack it away into hexagon-shaped beeswax honey cells. They then turn the nectar into honey by drying it out using a warm breeze made using their wings. Once the honey is dried out, they put a lid over the honey cell using fresh beeswax, kind of like a little honey jar. In the winter, when the flowers have finished blooming and there's not much nectar available, bees can open this lid and share the honey they saved. The hive works as a collective to provide each member with an adequate supply. Each bee producing just 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in its lifetime, significantly less than most people would expect. So to make just one 450-gram jar of honey, it would take the lifetimes of 1,152 honeybees. So let's not take for granted how much bees give us so that we might enjoy their delicious produce, especially when we consider this is also one of their primary food sources. Bee pollination is naturally important commercially for the production of not only honey, but other bee-related products like medicines and tinctures. The decline in wild bees has seen them lost from over a quarter of the places they inhabited since 1980, which has sent the value of commercially managed hives increasing. But more importantly than just producing food, bees are vital for the preservation of our ecological balance and biodiversity in nature. They pollinate the crops we eat, the plants and trees that absorb CO2, which counteracts climate change, and also produce the oxygen that we breathe. And we like breathing. Bees really are like Earth's tiny buzzing heartbeat, and with the decline of the bee population due to climate change, loss of habitat and use of pesticides, such as thiamethoxam, which was recently unbanned by the UK's Tory government despite it being harmful to bees, the loss of our buzzy friends is making the future of this planet of ours even more precarious. So let's celebrate them. So let's take a look at some of the things we can get from bees. Obviously, we've got some honey here. This is a fairly bog standard honey that you can get from most supermarkets. It's from a company called Rose, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's an organic honey. It's a decent honey. It's not a bad honey by any stretch of the imagination. You know, it comes from like organic agriculture, and it's certified by the Soil Association and stuff like that. So it's all like, you know, ethically made, ethically sourced, stuff like that. So that's not a problem, but it's still like a fairly common honey you can get over here in pretty much any supermarket. But it's not just honey that we can get from bees. There's loads of things that bees give us, or rather we take from bees, I suppose would probably be more accurate. Definitely vegans and things would like that would argue that, you know, obviously we're taking resources from the bees, which is completely fair. You know, at the moment we do get more than just honey from bees, and you know, the fact that we may not always acknowledge that is doing them a disservice. So I thought I'd try and educate a bit about what else we can get from bees. So let's take a look, shall we? So yeah, here we go. Here are all things we've made from bees. So we've got some other types of honey here, but we've also got other things that you may not necessarily think about, the things that we would get from bees. There are some other common things, such as these candles here. These are made from basically pure beeswax, and beeswax is made from honey. Bees collect nectar and pollen to make honey to feed the hive, and as they eat the honey, their bodies make wax, and they chew this wax with a little bit more honey to help build combs from the wax. And you know, obviously this is kind of what the hive is constructed from. And when beekeepers collect the honey, the combs are also collected to make things like these lovely pure beeswax candles here. So these are lovely. I have to find a use for these, and they even came with this lovely little bee brooch here. So wax and honey are probably the two more common things that you would think about getting from bees, but there's also other things that I wasn't really aware of that were also came from bees, and that we actually, you know, used in the day-to-day as, you know, human beings, such as this propolis here. This is propolis extract. I think that's how you pronounce it. Propolis, I don't know. But this stuff was not cheap, and that's kind of why it comes in this little pipette bottle. It's not actually like used as a food substance. It's actually used more kind of in medicinal purposes, and propolis is like the bee glue. It's like a resinous mixture that honeybees produce by mixing saliva and beeswax and like exudates from things like tree buds and sap flows and other botanical sources. They pretty much use it as like a sealant for like unwanted open spaces in the beehive. This is like 20% propolis, so you know, you can imagine if it was like the pure 100% propolis, it would not be kind of like a liquid in a bottle. But propolis itself, it's actually used to help fight against like bacteria and viruses and fungi, and has other anti-inflammatory effects. So it's often used in things like tinctures and throat sprays and cough medicine. And I'm actually going to try and use it to make my own throat spray a little later on. So that should be quite interesting, don't you think? So in this lovely jar here, we've got some royal jelly, or rather a mixture of royal jelly and raw honey, because royal jelly by itself is super expensive. It's really, really expensive, and you know, the fact that it comes in this fancy jar mixed with some honey, you know, gives you an indication that it kind of is a bit of a premium product, and that's kind of how it's seen. You know, obviously royal jelly, you know, it's going to be like become a bit of a commodity. But yeah, royal jelly itself, it's actually a milky secretion produced by worker honeybees, and it gets its name from the fact that it's used to nurture the queen bees, because obviously they're the queen bees, they get special treatment. And yeah, it typically contains like about 60-70% water, 12 to 15% proteins, 10 to 16% sugar, 3 to 6% fats, and 2 to 3% of vitamins, salts, amino acids. It really depends on the geography and climate about what its composition is, but people have started using it as a medicine, and so it's often sold in supplements, which are again not cheap. and it's been used for things like symptoms of menopause, diabetes, PMS, obesity, and other conditions like that. But there's no real scientific evidence to say yes, this stuff definitely helps. It's kind of one of those things that become like, oh, that looks like it's full of good stuff, so it probably will help with those kinds of things. But yeah, there's no real like scientific evidence behind it. So yeah, take from that what you will. But I'm going to be using this a little bit later on, not in a medicinal sense, but I'm going to be using it hopefully to create something rather nice and might be a bit fun, but I don't want to give anything away. We've also got some bee pollen. Now this isn't like the pollen we would get straight from the flower. This has been made by the bees, and it's a mixture of the flower pollen, nectar, enzymes, honey, wax, and bee secretions. God knows what they are, probably not best left to the imagination. But you know, foraging honeybees, they collect the pollen from plants, transport it to the beehive, and they store it, and it's used for food. So bee pollen's recently gained traction in the health community because it's loaded with nutrients, amino acids, vitamins, lipids, and other things I don't basically understand. So let's have a quick look at the bee pollen. I'm going to get a plate here. So you can see that the bag's a little bit misleading. You don't actually get that much in there. Again, it's not a cheap thing. Let's pour some of it out onto the plate, and you can smell from that bag. Well, I can, you can't. But it really smells like honey, and it's kind of like this really like coarse grain type substance. So I'm going to try and use some of this a little bit later to try and just use it to enhance some rather nice yummy stuff. Again, I don't want to give anything away, but it should be a nice simple recipe that we can use some bee pollen in. Now another thing that we get from bees, usually not very willingly, is bee venom, usually when we get stung by a bee. Because the bee venom is actually what makes a bee sting hurt. It's not actually the act of being stung by the bee, it's the bee venom itself. And you can actually get that in things like this. This is a basically daily face moisturizer, which I managed to pick up reduced. This little tube here was £9.99. £9.99 for a tube that size. And that was reduced. That was reduced from £39.99 for a tube of face moisturizer. So that gives you an idea of how expensive bee venom is. I actually looked for bee venom by itself, and it was ridiculously priced, and it's not easy to get hold of either. So that's why it's kind of always bought in things like this, because again, it's kind of got medicinal properties. Bee venom is actually kind of used in a shop for bee sting allergy, kind of like a vaccine, you know, in the sense that obviously you get some of what makes you unwell, or something that gives you the allergy, and it's used to treat it. But it's also used in medicine and cosmetics, like this highly overpriced face cream. But other than the fact it's got bee venom in it, it's pretty much like a face cream like any other. And I'm going to have to put this on my face now. Let's hope I'm not allergic. Now this is not something we get from bees, not directly anyway, but it is made from honey, which we get from bees, and this is Mead. Mead is basically an alcoholic drink which is made from honey by fermenting honey. It's usually about 14-15%, kind of like a wine, and it's a very old drink. It's been drunk for many years, probably way back into like medieval times and stuff like that. So it's seen as quite an old-fashioned drink. It probably doesn't get drunk as much as it used to, but when I did drink, I quite enjoyed it. It's quite sweet, as you can imagine. But obviously I'm not going to be drinking this because I don't drink anymore, but I am going to use some of this to hopefully make some interesting things. But I'm not going to be doing that in this video, because I want to try and make a few things using mead. So that will be another video for another time, so keep your eyes open for that. But this is obviously a honey-based drink, so if you fancy trying it, it's not easily available. I picked this one up, I think in Waitrose or something like that, a high-end supermarket. But you can easily order it online if you're having difficulty getting it in the shop. And then finally we come back to honey, because obviously honey is the thing that we probably consume most from bees, and the thing that we love the most and is most readily available. But it's not just like this fairly regular honey that you can get from rose. There's plenty of other honeys out there, such a variety, like wines, that depending on the flower and things like that, the bees collect their nectar and pollen and stuff from. It all depends and creates different flavors of honey and different styles and types of honeys. So I've got a few different types here. So I've got 2 honeys here, which is from Payne's Southdown Bee Farms, and these are a local honey. And you can see the local Sussex honey, but there's 2 different types. So you've got this runny honey here, and also this set honey. Now you might think, oh, there's a difference between the 2 because there's, they're probably processed differently or something like that, but it's not actually the case. So, runny honey and set honey, the difference is basically the fructose content or the glucose content. So a honey with more glucose than fructose is likely going to crystallize very swiftly. So that would be like this set one here. But if it's got more fructose than glucose, then it's going to be more like a runny honey here. There might be some slight difference in terms of the taste because obviously you've got high levels of fructose and glucose, but in terms of like the nutritional value, very little difference at all. And probably if you put this under like some rather warm water or hot water, it would probably end up kind of turning more runny like this one as well. Here I've also got a English wildflower honey. You can tell it's good quality because it's got VIP written on it, but no, it's from a very reputable place called the Hive Honey Shop, which does some lovely honeys. This is, like I was saying, a wildflower honey, so it's not actually from cultivated fields where beehives might be kept nearby, so they're getting their nectar from one particular type of plant. So you're looking this at to be more of a polyfloral honey. So that's honey from nectar of many different flowers, whereas ones like the rose one here is probably going to be more like a monofloral honey. And they can come from things like orange blossom, pine, things like that. But the wildflower one comes from uncultivated fields, so the bees are free to gather from pretty much what they like, and this gives it a bit of a different taste and different profile and things like that. So it's a kind of different type of beast entirely. You can also get blended honeys. I don't think any of these are blended honeys, but that's basically different types of honeys blended together, much like you would like a whiskey or something like that. And you can also get hold of Manuka honey. Now, most people have probably heard of Manuka honey now because it's become quite popular, because it's not only a very, very high quality honey, but it's also got well known for its medicinal properties. So Manuka honey actually comes from the Manuka plant in New Zealand. So it's from one particular source, kind of like how Parmigiano Reggiano, it comes from the Emilia Romagna area of Italy, and how Cornish pasties can only be called Cornish pasties because they're made in Cornwall. This comes from the Manuka plant in New Zealand. So obviously it's got a way to come, and it's got a picture of New Zealand there. So when bees pollinate from this plant, their honey is actually more potent than standard bee honey, and it's because it has a higher concentration of methylglycoxyl or MGO. I may have completely butchered that pronunciation, so let's just going to call it MGO for now. And basically Manuka honey has antibacterial, antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties, and so it's often labelled with a unique Manuka factor. And you can see this one here, it says MPA here, but it's basically the same thing. So it's 10 plus here. So 0 to 4 is like an undetectable amount is present, 5 to 9 is low levels are present, 10 to 15 is useful levels are present, so that kind of is like the minimum you will probably want to get. So I'd say 10 at minimum, like this is, and 16 and above is superior high grade levels. So the higher the number, the higher these level of compounds, and the greater the medicinal effects. Also, the more expensive it is, so it's not going to be cheap. This stuff is not cheap. I mean, this 10 plus jar here is about 20 quid, which is still very, very expensive for a jar of honey, but like a 1,000 plus MGO Manuka honey will probably set you back upwards of £100, £200, maybe even £300. So yeah, it's not it's not cheap, but it does have verified medicinal effects. So I keep this one here. Oops. I keep this one here, and I have a like a teaspoon of it every so often. Sometimes mix it in with like some lemon hot water or with a tea, you know, like a nice fruity tea or something like that, if I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. So I don't have it all the time, but I do use it every so often. Then last of all, we've got honey in its most natural state. So this is still in the honeycomb here. It's basically straight from the hive and it's contained in beeswax, which might seem counterintuitive to eat, but in this form it is completely edible. But I wouldn't recommend you going around munching on things like beeswax candles. So, you know, this is straight from the hive. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to give this a quick taste. You know, I've never actually had like honey straight from beeswax. So this has obviously, you know, crystallized a bit. So it's obviously got a higher, wait for it, got to check my notes again. It's got a higher fructose content. Wait, no, higher glucose content. I've already forgotten my own notes from before. So yeah, this is obviously crystallized, but you can get ones that are a little bit more runny as well. But I'm going to give this a quick taste. So it's still like all in the honeycomb here. Apologies if you don't like the texture of things with holes in them. There's a particular word for that. But I'm going to give this a quick taste to see what it's like. That is delicious. It's got an unusual aftertaste to it, which I'm guessing is like, you know, the honeycomb itself. But yeah, it's lovely. So naturally, with all these honeys at my disposal, it would be remiss of me not to try and make something with you know, at least one of them. So I've spent long enough educating you. It is now time to get on to the bit that you've all been waiting for, or at least hopefully you've all been waiting for, and let's make some stuff with honey. So the first thing we're going to be doing in our making things made from things made by bees is going to be using our propolis extract to make some homemade throat spray. So this should be quite interesting. So we're going to be using our propolis, and we're going to need some green alcohol. Don't worry, I haven't fallen off the wagon hard and started necking grain alcohol. But this is what we're going to need. It's about 70%, probably about 150 proof. You don't want to go too much lower than that. You want to make sure it's food grade alcohol, because obviously you're going to be spraying it in your mouth, in your throat. So don't go using rubbing alcohol, because that is not good for you. Or at least, you know, it's not good for consumption. So this is all we're pretty much going to need at this stage, because we're going to make our tincture, which is going to be the base for our throat spray. So I've got myself a sterilized jar here, which we're going to be making our tincture in. Get myself some scales, and I want to put in about roughly 10 mils of my propolis extract. Let's just do it by the bottle rather than the pipette. There we go, 10 mils. What does this actually smell like? Kind of medicinal, which is, you know, good, because, you know, we're making a medicine with it. Basically, we want 2 parts propolis to 9 parts of our alcohol. So we're going to pop this in there. So that's about 90 mils of our grain alcohol. And then on with the lid, going to give it a shake. But you're going to want to put this in a cool, dark place for about 1 to 2 weeks and shake it at least once every day. So I'm going to pop this into my cupboard. But in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one I made earlier. If you don't know what Blue Peter is, it's a UK kids program where they make a lot of things and tend to do things in advance a lot. So this is going to be the base for our throat spray, and we're also going to need some of our honey, preferably a nice raw local honey, and some warm water. And that's it. That's all we're going to need for our throat spray. So I've got myself a little bowl here for mixing, and we're going to want to use about 45 milliliters of our tincture. A couple of tablespoons of our honey, that's about 45 grams worth, and about a tablespoon of our warm water. Then I'm just going to whisk this together until I'm happy the honey has dissolved. Try not to get it everywhere like I have. You know, just by mixing this together and get the smell of it, I can tell this is going to be like an effective antiseptic. Then we want to transfer our throat syrup into some bottles. I've got 3 here. I probably won't need them all. Be surprised if it actually fills up 2. If you don't have any of these, I just got them off the internet. It was about £3 for 3 bottles, so they're dead cheap. And then you're going to want a funnel. I hope this fits just about. And then we want to transfer carefully into the bottle. There's one, on with the lid, and then bottle number 2. And on with the lid for that as well. And there we go, 2 bottles of homemade throat spray using propolis from bees. So I'm not going to use these now. I will use these towards the end of the video once I've done a load more talking. It will help me with my vocal cords. Up next, we're going to use our bee pollen. Now, what are we going to use our bee pollen for? Well, we're going to make our very own mother fluffing chocolate spread. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to need our bee pollen. We're going to need cocoa powder, honey, and cashew butter, and that's all we're going to need. So to make our chocolate spread, all we do is mix together our honey. So there's 150 grams of our honey here. You can adjust this to taste, but I am going for about 150 grams. Then we want 60 grams of our cashew butter. I really like cashew butter. I love peanut butter, but cashew butter is also good, if more expensive. Then in with our cocoa powder, which you want to make sure you've got as many of the lumps out as possible. And I didn't mention there's a tablespoon of cocoa powder there, and also a tablespoon of the bee pollen. Then all we want to do is mix that all together. And with that all well combined, I'm just going to take it and transfer it into a nice container, like this nice pot I've got here. And there we go, that is our homemade bee pollen chocolate spread. And I'm just going to put the lid on that and save it for later, because we're going to be making something soon that will go wonderfully with this. Next up on our journey of making stuff from things what bees gave us, we're going to use our royal jelly with raw honey. And before I do that, I just want to see what this tastes like by itself. I'm guessing like honey because it's mostly honey, but it's got a weird texture to it. It's quite, I don't know, fluffy, I would say almost. I guess it's kind of jelly-like. See what this tastes like. It is kind of honey-like, but I don't know, it's like smoother and creamier. It's rather nice. But what are we going to use this for? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we're going to make some royal jelly fudge. Now, it's not going to be like fudge in the strictest sense of the word, because we're not going to be like boiling sugars and things like that. No. It's going to be a lot simpler than that. So we're going to be using our royal jelly, some more of our cashew butter. We want some coconut oil, so I've got extra virgin coconut oil here. And then we've also got cacao powder. We could obviously use the cocoa powder from earlier, but let's mix it up a bit, shall we? So we just need these 4 ingredients to make our royal jelly fudge. So we need 80 grams of our royal jelly and raw honey mixture. We need 45 grams of our cashew nut butter, or you could use any other nut butter, almond butter, maybe even tahini if you wanted to. But as I said earlier, I prefer cashew nut butter. Then we need 60 grams of our coconut oil, which I've melted in the microwave for about 10-second bursts until it becomes a nice clear liquid. Then last but no means least, we need our raw cacao powder. We need 3 tablespoons of that, which is about 25 grams worth. Then all we do with these is get ourselves a bowl and start adding them in one at a time. So we've got our raw jelly and raw honey mix, then our coconut oil, and our cashew nut butter, and then our cacao powder. Then mix that together until it becomes nice and smooth. Might take a while because there's some lumps in that cashew nut butter and also probably a few lumps in the cacao powder as well. But look at the colour of that. We want it to then be poured into either like a small pan, which has been lined with greaseproof paper, or if you're like me and you keep a ton of silicone bakeware around, then you want to try and pour it into this as carefully as you can. So let's see how neatly or not I can do this. That's 1. See how many more I can do without spilling it everywhere. 3 before I get it everywhere. Then I'm just going to take these and gently transfer them across to a tray. Let's see if I can do this without getting them everywhere. You should have done this on the tray in the first place, Matthew. Don't do what I did, I know. Uh-oh. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Don't do what I did. Oh well. Okay, well, yeah. Some of them are going to be bigger than others. Right, I've transferred as much of my spilled mixture back into these as I can, and these are now going to go into the freezer just until they're set up. If you have a bit more time, you can just pop them into the fridge, but I'm a bit more pressed for time, especially now that I've been cleaning up after myself. So I'm going to be popping these in the freezer and just checking them until they're nicely set. Right, here we go. These haven't had very long at all, probably about like 10-15 minutes in the freezer, and these are all nicely set. So I'm going to pop these out of their silicone molds, ignore all the mess that's around them. So these should just hopefully, there we go, pop out like so. Some people might argue it's not fudge, it's more like, you know, chocolates or something like that, but you know, it's something nice. It's something nice and sweet, but not too sweet, and all natural good stuff. So there we go, some lovely homemade royal jelly fudge, or chocolates, or whatever you want to call them. But either way, they look pretty good, don't they? I'm going to go and put these in the fridge for now, just to keep them set, and I'll try one of these later on. Last but by no means least, we're going to focus on our honey. Now, we have already used honey in our cocoa spread, but this recipe is going to be primarily focused on our honey, not on the bee pollen. So we're going to be making challah. Okay, so this isn't challah, but it will be challah once we put it all together. And challah is a traditional Jewish bread. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I think it's pronounced challah, but it's spelled like challah. And it is a lovely, lovely bread. Obviously a bit sweet and quite enriching because it's got egg yolks in it. And it's just beautiful, and it's beautifully presented. It's a braided loaf, and I'll show you how to braid that as well, and hopefully I'll get that right. So to make our challah, we're going to need 560 grams of strong white bread flour. We need 10 grams of yeast, 2 teaspoons of salt, 90 milliliters of veg oil, 180 milliliters of warm water, 3 beaten eggs, and also save an egg yolk for brushing it afterwards, and of course, honey. And we've got 150 grams of just the regular honey here. I haven't used anything too special. And yeah, and that's it. And that's what we use to make our challah. So let's get started. So today I'm going to be using my stand mixer to make our challah. You can do it by hand. You can use like a spoon and a dough scraper and stuff like that. But it will get messy. It will get sticky because it's got the eggs in it. It's got the honey in it, and it's going to be, yeah, a messy, messy time. So if you've got a stand mixer, I highly recommend you use one. So to get us started, we're going to be putting in our flour. And then we want to go in with our yeast on one side of the bowl, and then in with our salt on the other side of the bowl, because if we mix together the salt and the yeast too soon, the salt will damage the yeast and the yeast won't end up being as effective. Then we're going in with our veg oil, then our honey, which our yeast will like because they love, love, love sugary things like honey and sugar. Get a scraper to get all that honey out. And then in with our eggs as well. Now at this point, this is where I'm going to put on my dough hook. I've got in a little bit closer so we can see what's going on there. I'm just going to start this off very slowly, and I'm just going to end up adding in our water a little bit at a time because I don't want to make the dough too wet, but I also don't want it too dry, so I can judge it as I'm going along. So I'm just going to start off with about half of this. You can see that's starting to come together. It's picking up the loose flour. Just going to add in a little bit more. Then I'm going to turn the speed up just to help it bring it all together a bit more. It is quite wet at the moment, but the longer it starts to combine, the more it will come together. But I can add more flour if I need to. If you need to, go in with a dough scraper to try and get some of that off the bottom. Just make sure everything is being combined. You can see it's starting to come together into a more smooth and glossy dough. It is very sticky, much like a brioche would be. This is why a stand mixer is better rather than using your hand. So you can see that's still quite sloppy, so I'm going to add in a sprinkling of more flour. Then set that off again. Right, that has been going for about 6 or 7 minutes, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this off. You can see the dough's looking lovely and smooth, but at this point I just want to take it out of the bowl, tip it onto the surface, and then I can start to get a feel for the dough. So what I'm going to do is just dust this surface very, very, very well. Make sure it doesn't end up all sticky. Then I'm going to scrape my dough onto the surface. You can see it's still quite a sticky and tacky dough. But by bringing it onto the surface, I can start to get a feel and bring it into the consistency that I want it to be. See, if I'd been doing this all from the start, this would already be so sticky and such a mess everywhere. So I'm going to use my goat scraper. What's a goat scraper? A dough scraper. Gently bring this together so you can see with not much effort and a little bit more flour, it brings it into a very, very nice, more manageable dough. I've done barely anything with that. And it's brought it together really, really nicely, and it's such a nice dough to handle. In fact, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Doesn't need much doing to it at all. Just kind of taking on some of the flour that I put down. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bowl, which I'm going to then grease well with some vegetable oil. I'm going to take my dough, pop it in there, then I'm going to place over a shower cap. If you don't have a shower cap, then cling film will do nicely. Then I'm going to leave that in a warm, dry place to brew for a good 1 to 2 hours. So it's been a good couple of hours, and if I take off our shower cap here, you can see our challah dough has risen up nicely. So I am going to take this out of my old bowl, throw down some flour, and just knock the air out of this. Then what I want to do is I'm going to want to split this into 4 even pieces of dough. So I've weighed this out. It weighs approximately 1,165 grams or 1.165 kilos. So if my maths are correct, I want this to be about 291 grams each pieces of dough. We're going to make those into sausage type shapes and then plait them together into a lovely 4-plated loaf. So I've got my scale here. Let's try and see if I can get this roughly right. Way too much, that's 363. Let's take some of that off. There we go, 290 grams, so that's gonna be 1. There we go, we've got 4 pieces of dough, which are all roughly around 291 grams-ish. Your mileage may vary. So I'm just gonna dust down a bit more flour here to stop them from sticking. And I wanna make these into basically a sausage shape. So I'm gonna roll these around, pinch underneath, and start to roll them out. Just do this by kind of going to the center and then rolling outwards. Try and make it as even as you possibly can. There we go, so we've got 4 sausage shapes, all roughly the same sort of length and width. It's always going to be slightly different, but those are pretty good. Now we're going to want to braid this up into a nice plated loaf. So what we do is we take each of the ends and kind of just pinch those together. And then we want to start off by going right to left, bringing this over here, and then left to right, and then we want the left to the middle, then we want the second right to the left, then we want the right to the middle, and then we want the second left to the right over here, then we want the left down into the middle here, then we want the second right to the left over here, and we want this right one to the middle, and that's basically made our 4-plated loaf. It might take more kind of plates depending on the length and breadth of your loaf, but that's all come together. I'm going to pinch that underneath here and put that under here. It's not my neatest effort in the world, but it is plated together and it should look pretty nice once it's all risen. Then I'm going to take this, lift this up, pop it onto a baking tray, which I've just dusted nicely with some flour to stop it from sticking. And then I'm just going to cover this up with a clean tea towel and leave it to brew for probably not too long this time, probably maybe 30 minutes to an hour at most, just until it's a little bit risen again. So it's been about 45 minutes and that has risen up really nicely, and it is now time to get it coated with an egg wash and into the oven to bake into a lovely challah loaf. So I've got my egg yolk here from earlier, which I'm just going to beat up. Then I'm just going to get my brush here and brush this all over with my egg yolk. Try and get as nice and even as I possibly can. Now with a nice egg wash all over it, you can put this into the oven as is. Sometimes it gets covered in sesame seeds. You can do that as well for a little bit of flavour and texture. But I thought, seeing as I have it, I'm going to use my bee pollen because why not? I've got it. It's not traditional in any sense of the word, but it'll give it a little bit of extra flavour, a little bit extra texture, and it gives me a reason to use some of this up. Then I'm going to take this and pop it into the oven at about 200 degrees C for about 30 to 40 minutes, and I'll judge it once it comes out the oven and see if it needs any longer, because it's quite a chunky loaf. So it's been about 40 minutes, I'd say, because I wanted to make sure it's all baked through. And we have our challah here, or challah, however you pronounce it. And it is risen up a heck of a lot. And it's quite dark, maybe a bit too dark, one might say. But I wanted to make sure it was baked all the way through, because the last thing I wanted was like a doughy middle. So it is darker than I anticipated. But if you want to make sure it's baked all the way through, and also not quite get a dark colour as this, then you can always put some foil over it. So like maybe halfway through, just check it halfway through, see what sort of colour it is, and if you're happy with the colour, then put the foil over and that will reflect some of the heat back and stop it from getting so dark. But it still looks good and it smells amazing. The bee pollen perhaps wasn't the best idea because it's gone quite dark, but that's fine. It was an experiment. But it looks good, and I'm going to give it a little bit of time to cool down, not too long, because quite frankly, I want to try this. And to be honest, bread's always nice when it's not long come out of the oven and a bit warm. And we can also try this with a little bit of our homemade chocolate spread as well. So can't wait for that. So I'm going to let it cool for a bit, then I'm going to cut into it. Okay, this has had a little bit of time to cool, not a great deal, only about half an hour or so, but I'm impatient. I want to be able to cut into this, try it, see how it's turned out. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's take this end bit off first. Oh, that is a lovely texture. Look how soft and springy that is. It's kind of got the texture of brioche, but it's obviously not got all the butter and stuff in it, but it's still warm, smells amazing, it's got a lovely bounce. I'm happy with that. Like I said, the outside is a bit more done than I would want it to be, but inside, that looks lovely. And I'm going to take another slice off because I want a slice to go with our chocolate spread. So I'm going to carefully cut through this. Gotta cut through this, gotta cut through this. Do-do-do, yes, I just hummed Daniel Bedingfield. Showing my age. Look at that. That has turned out lovely, absolutely lovely. I'm happy with that. Like I said, outside is a bit more done, but inside, well, that's what counts, I'm told. But wait, before we go any further, I need to get our chocolate spread onto this slice of challah. So let's see how this has set up. Oh, look at that. That has set up really quite nicely. Look at that. That is smooth and gooey. It's dripping onto the bread. Oh, that's spreading out really nicely. Look at that. Look at that. Like Nutella, but you know what's gone into it. Only like 4 things and all good stuff. So yeah, now I'm gonna give this a try. Well, it's been a journey of discovery, hasn't it? You've learned so much about bees, you're not going to remember any of it. But I hope you found this interesting. But before I babble on too much, I think I need to clear my throat a bit. Here we go. We've got some of my own throat spray made using bee propolis. Yeah, let's see whether this works. And yeah, this is obviously full of alcohol, so I'm definitely not going to have more than a couple of sprays of this. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Yeah, that's something, all right. Yeah, that should clear up any throat, I would imagine, of anything. Whew. But yeah, bee propolis, make your own throat spray. Why not? Give it a go. You can pick up propolis off the internet, and literally it's just pretty much alcohol, bit of honey, water, and the propolis. You know, it's really easy. Just give it a try. Okay, that's the medicinal stuff out of the way. Let's give the food a go, because that's what we've all been waiting for. That's what you've been waiting probably about 90 minutes once I've edited this together. So let's give some of our royal jelly fudge a go. Fudge? Is it fudge? Who knows? But it certainly looks good, doesn't it? And it's all a little bit melty at the moment because it's very, very warm today. But made using royal jelly, some cacao, coconut oil, and cashew nut butter. So let's give this a try, shall we? Oh, oh yeah, it has got a fudgy texture. Can't speak. This is melting quite quickly, but it is, yeah, it's actually a very, very fudgy texture, and that is melting so fast. It is so warm. That was so tasty. That's really good. You've got that sweet honeyness to it. Honeyness, that's a word. But also, obviously, you've got the chocolatiness, and it's smooth and it is fudgy, and that's really nice. And I've got to go clean my hands now. Yeah, those are delicious. Definitely give those a go. Those are super, super simple. And even if you don't have royal jelly, you might be able to give it a go with like just honey. But yeah, those are really nice. I'll have another. Next up, I'm going to give our challah a go. I'm just going to try it by itself to start off with, because I'm going to have it in its most natural state before I try a bit with our homemade chocolate spread on it. But again, I'm really happy with that texture and how springy and bouncy it is. So obviously it's a traditional Jewish bread made with honey. Mine's not so traditional because obviously I chucked bee pollen on top, which I probably wouldn't do again. But if you do have sesame seeds or anything like that, you can always chuck that on. And I'm just going to break off this end piece here and give it a taste. Oh, that is good. Slight sweetness to it. You've got that honey flavour to it, but it's an accent to it, and it is absolutely delicious. And you could do all sorts with this. Probably be good for like French toast or something like that. Might be some people screaming at me saying that's not traditional, but it is absolutely beautiful. But what might be even more beautiful is challah with our homemade chocolate spread with bee pollen in it. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what this is going to be like. So let's get a good bit with some chocolate spread. That's got a good bit on it. So cheers. Oh yeah. Sorry, I was having a moment. That is delicious. You've got the honey notes to it, obviously, but you've also got the chocolate, and it's beautifully smooth, but you've got a bit of a texture from the bee pollen, and obviously you've got that beautiful challah bread on it, under it, in it. Who cares? It's going in my face. Yeah, homemade challah with homemade chocolate spread is the one. That was amazing. So that is it. That is it for my World Bee Day special. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit of an epic. You know, we've learned things, we've made medicinal things. It's been a journey of discovery, and hopefully you've had an enjoyable time back on my first video in like 11 months, and I have enjoyed it. It's been hard work, this one. A lot has gone into this, so I really do hope you enjoy it, and hopefully I'll get back to like a regular once a week schedule now. But obviously it all depends on how life treats me, which has not been brilliant at times, but I'll let you know. I'll keep you updated, but from now on, it'll probably be about once a week, and then we'll see where we go from there. But I really hope you have enjoyed this video back. It feels good to be back. It's been a while. I'm rusty AF, but hopefully, this is just a sign of, good things to come, and getting back to doing what I enjoy, which is making videos for you, however many of you decide to watch this, whether it's 10 or 10,000, I don't know. It'll probably be about 10, let's face it. But I hope you've enjoyed this, and yeah, I will see you next time on Big Foodie Geek. Take care, bye. Bees are found on every bees. Bees. That's an outtake. Bees are found on. Why do I keep saying bees like that? Bees. Not the bees. Not the bees.
Oh no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!